I don't think that's going to be your.
And a gracious good evening. Welcome to everyone. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County and the City Club of Central Oregon, wish to welcome you to the forum for candidates for Senate District 27. Hi, I'm Mike Fisher with KPOV. Thank you to the candidates who are participating. We appreciate the gravity of running for office. Candidates in the race are Anthony Broadman and Michael Summers. Please hold your applause and refrain from comments during the forum. We also ask you to do what about everybody asks you to do nowadays, and that's please mute your phones. This forum is being recorded and will be uploaded to the League of Women Voters YouTube channel within 24 hours if you would like to watch it or share it with friends. Candidates will have 1 minute for opening remarks and 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds to answer each question. Questions have been submitted by the public and screened by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing remarks. For opening statements, we have randomly selected the order. The order who answers each question first will be rotated. We will begin now with the candidates' opening statements, 1 minute each. First, Anthony Broadman.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody for being here and tuning in online. My name is Anthony Broadman. I'm running to be your next state senator for Senate District 27. In 2022, I was serving as mayor pro tem of the city of Bend when I got the call that we had had a terrible shooting at our grocery store. I think we all remember where we were that night. I was concerned for my 3 daughters. I was concerned for my wife, who's a physician. I was concerned for my neighbors and my community. I rushed to the command center, and that night we worked to make sure that this community was safe. And in the days that followed, what I heard from law enforcement, from grocery store workers, from the entire community was gratitude that we had put in place the tools to prevent a much worse tragedy that night. The choices we make in public policy, they have real life consequences. They're too important to walk out on. They're too important to engage in divisiveness and partisanship. That's the kind of city councilor I've been, practical, leading from the middle, focused on progress. My name's Anthony Broadman, and I'd be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And now for your opening statement, 1 minute, Michael Summers.
Good evening. I'm a father of 4 daughters, small business owner in here of a 70-year-old family business, lifetime Oregonian, a 4th generation Oregonian, lifetime Central Oregonian. I play music, and I am here tonight to represent Central Oregon. It's been an honor to grow up here and live here. I got involved with politics during COVID when I saw a real problem where our communities were being divided and blown up over school issues a lot. I mean, there were plenty of things happening during COVID, but my daughters all were in school, and I wanted to do something about that. So I got involved in the school board during COVID and have had the opportunity to wrestle with some of the most difficult and challenging issues in education in our lifetimes. And it has worked, and we've been able to focus on education because our board is balanced. We have people on the right and people on the left, and the balance keeps the crazy out, which is really nice. So we can focus on what we're there to do. So we've been able to do that really well, and I would love for the opportunity to do that in Salem.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Anthony, for your opening statements. We will now move on to questions, and questions will address key areas of concern for voters in District 27, including climate and the environment, elections, education, healthcare, law enforcement and public arms, human rights, and transportation. Some of these questions may be lengthy and multi-layered. We indulge your patience and your thoughtfulness of your responses. Question number 1, and this will be addressed to Michael first. You will have 90 seconds to respond. We will face continued drought in Central Oregon. What do you think should be done in the near future to prepare us for a growing lack of water?
Yeah, so obviously we've grown a lot, and our infrastructure has needed to grow at the same pace, and it has not. There are a lot of different things you can do to maintain our water resources. One of those is water conservation. In Redmond, our Redmond School District is the biggest user of water in the city, and we are working to remedy that through xeriscaping, through turfing some of our fields, and just overall reduction. Water is about one of the most contentious issues there are because everyone needs it. And it's crucial for growing the growth of our cities, as for the be able to grow our agricultural needs. So there's always a balance there. How much water do we leave in the river? How much do we pipe? How much do we allocate in different areas? Very difficult things at hand. And there's, like anything, it's nuance and there's a balance. So we have to be able to provide water for our cities so that they can grow with the infrastructure they need. We also need to make sure our farmers and agriculture have what they need. So it's a very, very contentious topic. Every region in our state is different because every basin is different. Right now, the Department of Water Resources wants to use a blanket approach, which is kind of a one size fits all. And I don't think that's appropriate because we have different needs for different areas. There are certain places that are right along the Columbia River and could be pulling the majority of what they need out of the river. You know, the rivers are our savings, or excuse me, there are our checking accounts. Our basalts and aquifers are our savings accounts. So we need to be making sure that we're using them appropriately.
Thank you, Michael. And if either of you need me to repeat the questions, I am happy to do so. But Anthony, your 90 seconds start now.
Thank you. As an attorney for Native American tribes, you know, I have come to learn that water is really life, and that if we don't conserve the water resources that we need now and for generations to come, we're setting ourselves up for failure and disaster. We know that climate change is impacting our access to water resources right now, both for housing, for economic development, for agriculture. We should be really proud in this community because working together, we have actually in the city of Bend kept water use at roughly the same, even though we've grown. And we've done that through conservation measures and really honoring and protecting the Deschutes River and the Deschutes Water Basin. The total municipal use for our basin is just under 2%. So when we talk about what the cities are using, we're talking about a very small percentage of the Deschutes Water Basin. It's important to conserve. That should never be an excuse not for cities not to conserve. But I think we can serve as an example to the rest of the state. If we conserve, if we use mitigation credits and protect the river and the resources that we have, you know, we can continue to grow sustainably, make sure that people living in cities have access to water, to make sure we unlock the housing that we need for economic development and folks to stay here and raise our families and start businesses here. So it's really an opportunity, I think, for Central Oregon, like we've done in so many other areas, to lead the rest of the state.
Thank you. We'll move on to elections, and Anthony, you will be up first on this one. Are you in favor or opposed to the concept of having an independent citizens redistricting commission assume responsibility for that function from the state legislature? Why or why not?
Yeah, the integrity of our elections is a point of pride for us in Oregon, and I mean that from whether it comes from the redistricting all the way down to making sure that our elections are fair and safe, and that we can continue to trust that our mail-in system is working. I think we should be really proud of that system. We also need to make sure that people believe and understand in the integrity of the redistricting process. I'm in favor of a redistricting approach that reflects the values of our community. And that is striking balance, making sure that people have a say in their state government. And when those committees can be co-opted by partisanship, frankly. I think the process that we embarked upon in the last redistricting process generally worked correctly. And as long as it does, I would continue to advocate for its use. To the extent we start to see elements over the next, we'll see our redistricting process start up again over the next 4 years. And to the extent we need different tools like independent commissions, I would be very open to looking at those.
Thank you. And Michael, we invite your response.
Yeah, I could see how maybe a balance of that with legislature would be an appropriate response to some of the redistricting that's going on. In different states, they take advantage of it in the same ways. One side has control and they typically will do what they do. And so both parties do it and both parties do some very interesting things that you look at certain segments of districts that will go all the way to Portland. And you think, I don't know that that's necessarily local representation to pick up another 10,000 votes or to do that here. So like I said, both sides do it. The idea of tampering right now with an already very shaky system, I think all of our confidence was pretty rocked in the recent past. In the last couple of weeks, even just finding out certain things were not as they were supposed to be with our motor voter registration, with people on the registry that should not be there voting, that should not be voting legally. And we have to do everything in our power to make sure that our elections have confidence in them, because that is the thing that will devolve us into chaos very quickly. When people stop trusting their electoral process, we have some really scary situations that can pop up. And that is something that's unacceptable to me. I believe in democracy. I believe in voting, but we have to have confidence in it. And both parties have been doing quite a lot to undermine the confidence of our electoral system recently. And that's a real problem. If we're going to keep a unified polity, we have to make sure that we are trusting that our vote counts and that others that should not be voting do not count.
Thank you, Michael. We will now move on to the subject of education. And I ask your indulgence. This question is rather lengthy. And Michael, you will be up first for the response. Schools are no longer considered safe places due to weapons, drugs, and experiences of discrimination. Do you support, will you vote yes to hire diverse teachers and school administrators and substitute law enforcement presence in schools with counselors, mentors, and mental health professionals? Within the role you seek, would you create protections or apply the law to end discrimination and prejudice against students of color, LGBTQ, and disabled students in Oregon?
Okay, there's a lot there. So first and foremost, our schools have to be absolutely safe. And I've spent my last 4 years overseeing the bond improvements of every one of our schools that have seen safe vestibules, closed circuit TV that goes straight to the police department. We've done a ton of upgrades to make sure that our schools are safe, and my girls are there. So that is my number one priority. There are a lot of improvement, areas of improvement for education, as far as making sure that we have teachers and staff that represent who we are and who our kids are. And so in our Redmond School District, we've really tried to make sure that our number one priority is as simple as possibly stated, is that every single student that walks into our buildings are known by name, they're known by ability, they're known by their strengths and their gifts, and they're resourced accordingly, so that nobody feels left out. Nobody feels like this school isn't for us, because public school is meant to be broad, because everybody's in it. You have absolutely everyone. So when you start doing certain things that exclude certain populations, it's no longer for everybody. So at its core, public education is there to serve absolutely everyone. And we've done a really good job of keeping the wheels on the bus to make sure that both sides are getting a chance to speak, that we are looking out for the least of our students, the ones that are impoverished, the ones that are facing homelessness, and making sure that they have the best ticket out of their poverty and out of the situation is a solid education, and making them feel like they're home. That is where I felt at home, was in Ben Lapine Public Schools, and I want that for my kids as well.
Thank you. And Anthony, we invite your response to that question.
Yeah, as a dad of 3 kids in Ben Lapine Public Schools, as a son of a public school teacher, brother of a public school teacher, setting policy in the legislature for education and funding our educational system, ensuring it's safe and equitable, is one of the most important jobs we have as legislators. And that includes fully funding our educational system, not cutting the main source of revenue to fund the Student Success Act and the Student Investment Program. And I take that really seriously. We are not meeting our obligation adequately. We are, I think, 44th in the country when it comes to higher ed education. It's obviously K through higher ed we're responsible for. And we have a lot more work to do. And that means setting policy, holding ourselves to higher expectations for our kids in schools, making sure that they're safe in school, safe from gun violence, safe from bullying, making sure that kids who see school as more than just a school, it's a safe place. It's the place where you go for help. that we continue to fund and adequately policy up those institutions.
Thank you. We will now move on to healthcare. And Anthony, your response will be asked for first. Approximately 240,000 Oregonians on the Oregon Health Plan will lose or have their medical benefits reduced in the post-pandemic recertification process. Do you support, will you vote yes to continue funding and expand OHP to cover all people who earn 400% or less of the federal poverty level?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at education and healthcare and meeting our obligation to the Oregonians who need it the most, my wife's a physician at St. Charles, and the impact that she has on kids the day that they're born, and the healthcare professionals and our healthcare system have on kids from the various early point of their social determinants of future health is one of the most important things we do as a state government. And so I support expanding coverage for the Oregonians who need it the most. It just makes good economic sense. If we're not meeting our obligation to Oregonians from a very early age, and as we age and become elders, I think that that's the very purpose of government, is to make sure that people who need care and can't obtain it are able to. So yes, I would expand healthcare resources for Oregonians.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I believe there's a place for social safety net in the healthcare element. I've been a beneficiary of that when me and my wife were first married and we had our first kid. And Oregon Health Plan was a really crucial part of being able to raise and support our daughters through some real challenging health issues. The numbers of 400%, that's something I haven't gone into the details on, so I don't know if that's the number. But I do believe that we absolutely have to have some social safety net for the least of these, the ones that can't take care of themselves, the ones that are impoverished and are struggling, and then healthcare can absolutely just put them under in a way that they may never recover. I do believe there's quite a lot of waste in the health industry, unfortunately, and especially when it comes to those services. So making sure that we are actually spending them wisely and actually doing routine audits to make sure that we are actually the dollars are going where they're supposed to be going and helping the people that they're supposed to be helping. So I think there's quite a lot of reform. There's quite a lot of areas to be saving money on. But I do think it is an important structure to have in place for people that can't afford anything.
Thank you. We will now touch on the area of law enforcement and public arms. And Michael, we'll invite you for your response first on the following question. What specific legislation would you support, if any, to reduce military arms sold to and bought by our police and sheriff departments in Oregon? And within the 90 seconds, please expand on your reasoning.
Okay. So I believe that our law enforcement should be the baddest dudes in town, and dudettes, I believe is the term. We need to be able to defend ourselves on that level. There are a broad range of guns available on the market, and our law enforcement should be cutting edge in every way. They should be fully funded. They should be supported in every way. They should have qualified immunity protected so that they can go out and make sure they can do their job without fear of criminality, unless criminality is present. Obviously, there are certain bad actors that do face the law when they step over it. But I do believe in fully supporting our law enforcement. I believe in Central Oregon, we have the best of the best. We have an excellent relationship in Redmond, for instance, with our law enforcement. There's a 90% approval rating from public perception of our law enforcement. And we want to maintain that. And obviously that's through good training, through making sure they have all the mental health support that they need. But we have done our first responders a disservice in the past by cutting their funding and undermining the confidence that we have in them in Oregon based off of national issues that have distracted us from supporting our brave men and women that are taking care of us on a day and nightly basis.
Thank you. And Anthony?
Yeah, to answer the question, I think there are policies that, for instance, we have at Bend Police Department and Redmond Police Department adequately protect our communities and our law enforcement officers when they're at work. When it comes to the question you asked about military style weapons, the bigger issue I think is when our law enforcement officers go out to keep us safe and they encounter criminals with military style weapons. That's of deep concern. It's a workplace safety issue, and it's something we need to make sure that we're keeping our community safe from. I'm really honored to be the candidate that's been endorsed by the Bend police officers, by the Oregon State police officers, by the Oregon State firefighters, by the Bend Firefighters Association. And I'm honored that they've entrusted me to continue to advocate for working families, the employees, the hardworking public servants in our law enforcement agencies, in our public institutions, who work so hard to keep us safe. So their support and my support for them to ensure that they have safe workplaces, I take to heart, and it's part of why I'll always fight for public servants in Central Oregon.
Thank you. We'll now move on to human rights, and Anthony, you will be asked to respond to this question. Immigrant seniors who have worked in Oregon for decades may struggle to meet their needs due to their citizenship status. Why would you support or not an aid program for current undocumented seniors in Oregon, similar to retirement payments, and fund outreach to ensure that all Oregonians can take advantage of state programs such as Oregon Saves?
Yeah, I have not seen this proposal. I would say I do think, just as a matter of economic sense, it's unfair that people pay into a system and then are unable to benefit from that system. And I would be, intrigued to review any kind of legislative concept related to that. The system needs to make sense, and people need to trust in it. When you go to work, you pay into Social Security. You need to know that that's going to be there for you. It is an earned benefit. And I think that should be true for all workers, everybody working in Oregon, and legal residents need to have trust in the system and make sure that they know when they're paying into a program that they're able to derive a benefit from it.
Thank you. And Michael, your response?
Yeah, I'm same. I haven't heard that concept before. I think the underlying issue is the immigration process is broken. It is really lengthy and really difficult and really expensive to get through. I had a chance to go down to the southern border on a fact-finding trip to see what was going on down there. See, a lot of talk about what was going on, see what was happening. But there was a massive issue with just people coming across and having no pathway to citizenship anywhere around them or in any attainable metric, something that they could get done. And it was really hard to see, because I thought, if I was a parent in that situation, I would be at the front of the line trying to get my kids to a better life. So there's a breakdown in the people coming in and being able to be introed into a program that would actually get them citizenship through a thoughtful process that's low enough barrier to entry that they could actually achieve it. And then would be fully engaged with all the systems that the rest of us are. So I think that's really the underlying issue is the brokenness of our immigration system.
Thank you, Michael. We'll now touch on our final area before cycling back. This will be on transportation, and Michael, you will be asked to respond first. Some Oregon communities are exploring commuter train infrastructure in places without passenger rail. Why do you support or not commuter train lines?
I think I've seen a lot of these projects be built and underutilized. I think demand has to drive the bus, so to speak, on transportation. You can justify it and say that it will alleviate congestion or pollution or any of those things, but if people don't use it, then it's an extreme waste of money, and I've seen a lot of those. I've gone to other places that are fully bought in public transport, and it's great. Everybody uses it, and they don't even need cars, but I don't see that being outside of the metropolitan areas a real focus of importance to us.
Thank you. And Anthony, your response?
Yeah, I had the honor of testifying before the Joint Committee on Transportation week before last when they were here visiting Bend. And from rural communities, urban communities throughout Central and Southern Oregon, the common refrain was safety, geographic equity when it comes to building our transportation system, and making sure that it's sustainably funded. And everybody in that room heard loud and clear that the urban areas in Southern and Central Oregon want investment in transit. And to say that people aren't going to use it, I've heard that before. It's sort of like saying, look, nobody's swimming across this shark-infested river. Why should we build a bridge, right? If you build dependable regional transit systems, they will be used. I think it's one of those areas that Central Oregon has done really well. When we take a little bet, a small bet on a small improvement in our community, like bus rapid transit, or including the more dependable set routes like I did when I was chair of the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, and we have fixed routes now in Redmond and Bend, that those are used, and they're especially used by people who can't afford to own a car or who are experiencing a disability. So I think it's important that as the state invests in the future transportation system, we are also taking transit into account.
Thank you. We will now return to the area of climate and environment. And Anthony, you will be asked to respond to this question. First, if one of the three primary minerals needed for scaling up green energy was found under Warm Springs tribal lands, would you support the state allowing mining of those lands? And please expand or explain your position.
Because I serve as chief judge of the Warm Springs Court of Appeals, I'm not going to answer specific to Warm Springs. Just ethically, I don't feel like that's appropriate. But I'll answer about lithium mining in general. And that is, look, we have to make sure that our transition on clean energy at every level, that's households, that's batteries for electric vehicles, that we're not balancing this transition on the back of working families and tribal communities and historically marginalized folks in Oregon like we've done in the past. And the just transition to ensure that working families are benefiting from the transition to clean energy has to be the North Star. I have unfortunately seen throughout the country, and this is probably true throughout the world, when we're looking for these minerals, communities that, that have been exploited before for natural resources are yet again seeing that occur. And we have a higher obligation to especially tribal nations in this country.
And Michael, your response?
Yeah, that's quite a hypothetical, and I wouldn't pretend to speak on behalf of a tribe on what they can and can't do with their land. Anthony can obviously speak better to that, but I think the core issue is the affordability of the energy that we have, and making sure if we do, as we do transition, it's done in a way that doesn't crush people. And the speed that is happening in Oregon is not sustainable for especially low-income families. It's one thing to absorb an increase on your natural gas bill when you're at a certain income level, but for the rest of us, seeing 30% increase on natural gas because certain city councilors want to talk about transitioning out of it and doing bans on natural gas doesn't make any sense. You have to have a balanced approach, and we're not using all the tools at our disposal, and we're starting to shut down some of the cleanest ones we have. So, even just in 2025, we're looking at an increase of 94.8% increase on commercial natural gas rates, which are hospitals and universities. And we're looking at utility customers in 2025 paying an additional $234 million. That's not sustainable. That's not a way that leaves people many options. So then you have people that go, I can't afford that. I'll have to burn wood. And then you're not solving your emissions issue. So this Oregon is very unbalanced with their environmental policy in the way that it's pretty anti-human. I believe in a really balanced approach that is actually driven by people's ability to pay as well as scalable transitions to other environmental issues. Yeah.
We will now return to the area of elections, and Michael, you will be up first for this question. Do you think the state of Oregon's legislature should require the United States Post Office to do all it can to assure timely and inexpensive delivery of ballots? And please expand on your position.
Of course, I think Oregon is probably the easiest place to vote anywhere. Your excuses are pretty limited here because you have several weeks and it's delivered to your house, whether you registered or not. So I don't really see that being an issue. I do think election integrity is crucial, and anything that we can do to keep, like I said, keep the integrity and people's belief in our system intact is worth looking into. There's a lot of different things in the water right now, and different mindsets where people are looking for a reason to not trust our system, and that's very dangerous and very scary. So I want Oregon to be the safest and most secure elections in the country, and we've opened up quite a few little side windows that at least shake people's confidence in our electoral process.
Thank you. And Anthony?
So yes, to answer the question, and our safe and secure elections, as I said earlier, are a point of pride, and we need to do everything we can to ensure the integrity of our elections, because we know partisans, divisive extremism in our communities will use any excuse to attack the legitimacy of our elections, whether that's January 6th, people attacking our Capitol, or people questioning the integrity of elections here at home and using it as an excuse to sow divisiveness and punch down on immigrant communities. We need to hold ourselves to the highest possible standard when it comes to election integrity, and that includes the federal government meeting its obligation to get ballots to and from us on time.
Thank you. We will now return to the area of education, and Anthony, you have the first opportunity on this question. With so many school districts facing funding shortages, is our school funding model broken? And if so, how would you propose a better school funding system?
So I support the governor's recalibration of the funding system. And I think that's an important path to make sure that my three daughters in Ben Lapine Public Schools and all of our kids in this community have access to great education. I visited with the Redmond superintendent last week about struggles that the Redmond School District has when it comes to fully funding special ed. We just simply don't have the tools built into our system to adequately fund the kids who require the most resources. And I would say that aspect of the system needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed now. Our entire school revenue picture needs to be recalibrated. And I think we're on track to do that. I would also just note that it's what I hear time and again in Redmond and Ben and sisters from teachers is how hard it is to afford to live here. So I worked on, and we got passed House Bill 3318, which is the first teacher priority housing development of its kind in the state. And these are the kind of creative and innovative tools we are going to need to ensure that teachers like my mom and my sister can afford to live in the communities where they work. Because if teachers aren't able to move here or stay here, then we're not meeting our obligation to kids. And we also just a really important funding aspect that, again, I'm hearing time and again from professionals, both educators and other school professionals, is workplace safety. And we need to make sure that we're funding and adequately putting policy in place to have safe workplaces for teachers.
Thank you. And Michael, your response.
Yeah, so education is about as bloated and disconnected a bureaucracy as you can find in the state of Oregon. It's not a lack of funding. It's they always say the answer is we need more money. We need more money, and it's a combination of that, and it's a combination of additional needs. So right now we have a massive disconnect between the Department of Ed, which has 500 to 600 employees, and our local school districts that are trying to navigate the waters of having to do a bunch more caseload than they've ever had to do, including mental health, including, there's so many different things after COVID that need shoring up. But the Department of Ed has a lot of money tied up in very specific things that often we don't need. And so the release of control from the state level and the release of funding to the local level to be able to specifically address needs that we face Some districts have chronic absenteeism. Some of them don't. But to say, well, you can only use this funding for chronic absenteeism, and it's just locked up here on the side. It takes it out of the most crucial place, which is right at the student level, where the student and the teacher and the parent know the needs of the student, and they can allocate resource and funding to support that individual student. When you take it from Salem and say everybody needs to improve attendance, and so we're going to put a ton of money in that, it just gets locked up and it gets bogged down. So there's a critical reworking of how we think about education, because obviously it's not working. We are at the bottom, and we've been at the bottom, and it's not because we don't have great teachers. We have excellent teachers that are locked up into doing a one-size-fits-all model from Salem, and it's not working.
Thank you. We'll now return to the area of healthcare, and Michael will ask for your response first on this question. Please share why you do or do not support a woman's right to bodily autonomy.
Oh, that was the shortest question we've got all night.
It is.
So what happened after the overturning of Roe versus Wade was not what everyone predicted. They said, oh, nationwide ban. So it's going to be just the exact returning to, a bygone era. States got the opportunity to choose, which ironically, and Oregon has chosen to make it its basically highest value before education, before homelessness, before all these things. They said, by God, we're going to have abortion. So me being set up as a threat to abortion in the state of Oregon is insane and ridiculous. I don't know how I ever could overturn that or do anything to diminish the abortion at any time for any reason at any stage of the pregnancy that Oregon has chosen. So instead, I want to focus on making sure that mothers, single families are resourced and have the health care that they need. The women that choose to keep their babies will be fully surrounded and have everything they need to make sure that those kids are raised well and are resourced and have all the opportunities that everyone else has. So that's it.
Thank you. Anthony?
Yeah, let me be crystal clear that I am 100% pro-choice. Every single legislative cycle, the extremism that we've seen in our current state senator has manifested itself as putting forward legislation to limit access to abortion, to prevent women from making choices about their own bodies. This is not this philosophical issue in the sky. Every single year, the extremists who, when they don't get their way, they walk out, in Salem attempt to limit women's access to reproductive health care. And I will always stand up for a woman's right to choose. And I will always make sure that it's safe and women have the choices that they want to make about their own bodies. Because I know that I don't know better than women. Women know better. And they should be the ones making the choices about their bodies.
Thank you. Anthony, we'll ask for your response first on this question, and we're returning to the area of law enforcement and public arms. What is your position on the sale of assault weapons and the regulating or not thereof?
So I support common sense gun violence prevention. We're in the middle of a lawsuit in this state over Measure 114, which is insane to me that we are still allowing the background check loophole to remain open. You can go and attempt to buy a weapon that somebody carries in a war. And if your background check doesn't come back in 3 days, you could still buy it. As a hunter, as a gun owner, I want other Oregonians to have the same access to safe firearms that I grew up knowing was the appropriate way to handle a tool. But this fixation on fetishizing military style weapons is being used to divide us. At the end of the day, Oregon chose very clearly that they wanted to close the background check loophole. And I'm really disappointed that that case is still in the courts, and confident that the courts will make the right call and that we will have a safer Oregon.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, I support the Second Amendment rights of every law-abiding citizen in Oregon to defend their families and protect themselves. I do believe in common sense reforms that keep guns out of the hands of criminals. But in Oregon, we have a pretty good handle on these things, and I want to make sure that we don't have our Second Amendment rights infringed upon.
Thank you. We will now touch on the area again of human rights, and Michael will ask for your response first on the following question. A little longer. Past legislative initiatives to protect renters are insufficient. Would you support or not funding and a process for the legal creation of tenant unions at all rental properties with more than 3 tenants?
So the part of the affordable housing issue we have is because there are really no protections for landlords in the state of Oregon. So people got rid of their rentals, which puts pressure on people to buy, because if it costs as much to rent a house as it does to buy, then you might as well buy. So we have, because of that lack of landlord protections, and those have to be balanced, by the way. Renters need to have rights as well, but we've overstepped and gone too far to one side to where it doesn't make any sense to be a landlord. If you saw during COVID, people were squatting in houses and not paying anything, and people were losing their properties, and it just doesn't pencil. So people went, I'll sell all of my, I talked to a customer of mine the other day that had 30 rentals, and she sold every single one of them. And they all turned into VRBOs. By the new owners, and that took those rentals off the market, which makes our already existing affordable housing crisis even worse. So those two things have to be in balance. You have to be able to protect your asset. You have to be able to evict tenants that are in breach of their contract. Renters need to have some rights as well. I don't support a renters union, I believe, if that was the terminology. I've never heard that terminology before, but I don't think that's the appropriate response for this.
Thank you. And Anthony?
Yeah, we have an imbalanced housing market, and it's not fair to the working families who need housing abundance in Central Oregon. I'm really proud that last year the city of Bend built more homes for working families than any other city in the state per capita. Any other city total other than Portland. We need more housing. We need more housing for working families. And when you have a healthy housing market, it provides balance and really alleviates some of these, I'm not familiar with this particular concept, but the need for a one-size-fits-all approach. We need our housing market to get healthy, and we do that by using the tools that we've used here, making sure that developers are building homes for working families, eliminating unnecessary red tape, and having government at the local and state level be a partner for housing abundance rather than standing in its way.
Thank you. We'll now touch back on the area of elections once again, and Anthony will ask for your response first to the following. There is an ongoing effort to pass a national popular vote bill, making the Electoral College superfluous. Forget that word. Oregon enacted the bill 2019. Do you support this bill? Why or why not?
I'm focused on one particular Oregon state election right now. I think there's a lot we can do to make sure that our federal elections reflect our values and the will of the American people. But when it comes to elections, I'm focused on this race right now and making sure that the public is clear about the policies that are really important to Central Oregon.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, I understand that when you don't get your way, you want to change things. And so that the founding fathers actually were pretty brilliant to ensure that there were small states were still represented and had a voice and were able to participate in elections. If you got rid of the Electoral College, that would just basically leave it to the coasts, and it would be over in it, and you would end up with large swaths of the population completely disenfranchised. So it doesn't have much to do with our locality and what we're doing here on the ground, but I don't support that at all.
Thank you. We'll touch back on the area of education, and Michael will ask you for your response first to the following. Where do you stand on universal pre-K, and what have you done or will you do to bring this to Oregonians?
I don't know that it necessarily needs to be universal. I think it needs to be an option for people. But there's different people that make different choices about whether they're a participation in pre-K. It's fine to offer it to whoever wants, but it is something that needs to be driven by the actual demand for it, I think.
Thank you. And Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at everything that we do in this community to make sure that our neighbors are healthy, that our communities are safe, it all starts really early. It really starts the day, that my wife sees a baby at the hospital when it's delivered. And if we're not putting kids and families in a position to succeed from day one, it doesn't make economic sense. And down the road, we're all going to pay for it. That family will pay for it. That Oregonian will pay for it. We will all pay for it. It just makes good economic sense to invest in the social determinants of future health at the very earliest stage. I believe that every kid should have access to pre-K. The kids who can't afford it should have access to pre-K. And I also think we need to take a harder look at more policies that expand school lunches and making sure that schools continue to be, these beacons of light for kids in our communities who need them.
Thank you. We'll now return to the area of healthcare, and Anthony will ask for your response to the following first. Most drug prices in the United States are 3 or more times higher than what pharmaceutical companies charge in other nations. What can Oregon legislators do to bring down drug prices in Oregon, if anything?
Well, I will give a ton of credit to one of our amazing state legislators, Emerson Levy, who in her freshman term actually did just that, brought down expensive drug prices for people who were experiencing, blood conditions. It is possible to do at the state level, and it just takes courage and standing up to big pharma, standing up to drug companies, and advocating for the people in our community who need access to healthcare. Healthcare includes drugs, and if you cannot afford the pharmaceuticals you need to keep yourself healthy and safe, then we're not adequately providing the public health that the Constitution, that Oregon state law requires us to provide to Oregonians. So affordable pharmaceuticals are part of that.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, I think the root cause of a lot of this is the corruption within the big pharma and how drugs are actually brought to market. There are so many lines crossed, and there are so many different areas that are abused that a free market is really nowhere to be seen. And so prices are inflated, prices are decreased all over the place, when market pressure would normally dictate a lot of those things. So once we start, unless we start sorting out the issues and the collusion between pharma and government, I don't think we're ever going to get accurate or fair pricing on medications. And the marketplace is the place where those things get sorted out.
Thank you. And Michael will ask for your response first as we return to the area of public arms. What is your position on common sense gun regulations and why?
That's the same answer as before. It is it's keeping keeping guns out of the hands of criminals. The law-abiding citizens are not the ones committing the crimes, the ones going through the background checks, the ones doing everything that they are constitutionally permitted to do. It is the criminals that are buying them, whether there's a law or not. They're finding places to buy them. They're getting them on the black market. It's not something that I think a well-rounded policy on cracking down on the law-abiding citizens is going to do it. And that's really all you ever get when it comes to Second Amendment. And rarely do they do anything to actually stop the gun violence. Because criminals will be criminals, and they will find the guns and they will commit the crimes. And so until we focus our attention on the criminals and stop trying to punish the law-abiding citizens, we're just going to get more of the same.
Anthony?
Yeah, this is tough because we know that we've lost people in this community who acquired guns legally. We need to focus on gun violence prevention, and we know what works. We have the tools. We do not need to be afraid of the NRA and the gun lobby when it comes to putting tools in place that keep our communities, keep our veterans, keep our students, keep our churches and our grocery stores safe. As a gun owner and a hunter, I want to make sure that people in this community have access to the same types of tools, firearms, that are a big part of my life, a big part of every fall for me and my kids. We also need to make sure that we're putting in place the gun violence prevention policies that work, closing the background check loophole, making sure that if you are suffering from mental illness, that it is easy to put in place an ERPO, the red flag laws that we use more here in Deschutes County than almost anywhere else in the state. We need to make sure that people, even if they are legally able to acquire a firearm and should not have it, don't have it in their homes, period. People who are suffering from mental illness, people who have been convicted of domestic violence cannot have access to weapons of war, period. And we don't need to be shy about keeping our community safe. Most of us are gun owners, and most of us want our kids, our neighbors, and our communities to be safe.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions before we'll ask both of you for your closing remarks. This is on the area of human rights. And Anthony, you will respond first. What role does Oregon have in the assimilation of refugees we accept into the United States?
Let me just talk about refugees in general, because I don't know what that, I don't really know what the question means by assimilation, but I will say that as somebody who descends from people who escaped a pretty terrible part of the world and came here and enjoyed the American dream, one of the reasons why I am in office and I'm running for office was because after I was elected to the city council, another Armenian American, I'm Armenian American, came up to me and said, I just became a citizen and you were the first person I got to vote for. And I take that really seriously. We are that shining light on the hill. And for the rest of the world, the promise of the American dream is something that most people don't think they'll ever have access to. I'm really proud of my ancestors who fought really hard to make this life for all of us, serve our country. Yeah, immigration is a really beautiful part of our fabric as a country and part of our patriotism.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, so I want to separate this from the national level immigration stuff. Once somebody is in my community, they're my neighbor. And my 4 daughters all speak Spanish. And we had an opportunity to meet several families that had been in country for less than 30 days from Venezuela. And my daughters got to be their translators and help try to get them. We all kind of sat, all of us, French speakers, sat around a circle trying to communicate and trying to like make them feel like, well, you're my neighbor now. How do we live? How do we support each other? And how do we take care of each other? And they ended up getting into safe housing, which was a really critical step for them, and trying to get jobs and kind of establish get plugged into the pathway to citizenship. So that's really my job is they're here, they're my neighbor. And what do I do to support them and help them to become citizens here? The assimilation thing, I don't know exactly what that means, but it's helping out as best I can with myself and with my daughters to support these people that came across. Gosh, I don't remember. It was like 4 or 5 different countries they walked across. So there are a lot of entangled, overlapping things, and there's a lot of messiness in the process. But in the messiness is where the work happens, and we try and figure out now that you're here, how do we support you and get you plugged in and to where you're not scared and alone. And like I said, there's all these different circles that people want you to draw between your faith and between being a neighbor and between your politics. And so, like I said, it all comes back to the broken. Ran out of time.
Thank you. And final question before your closing statements, and Michael will ask for your response first to the following. What is your opinion of using ranked choice voting?
I get the appeal. I think what you would end up with, especially in a state that has majority dominance of one party, you'll get a lot of disenfranchised people. And we already have a problem with that in Oregon. You already have an imbalance where a large portion of the state feels disenfranchised. And so what you'd end up with is the top three choices or top however many openings there are. But you'd end up with disenfranchising quite a bit of people that are not in the majority. So I don't agree with it.
Anthony?
I'm in favor of removing the extremes from our electoral system. And I think ranked choice voting has the potential to do that in certain scenarios. And I think we need to keep our eye on moving toward, removing these extremist polls that, pull our state in two really opposite directions. And ranked choice voting could be a part of that.
Thank you. And thank you to Anthony and Michael for your patience in responding to the questions from our voters. We will now move on to closing remarks. You will have 2 minutes. And Michael, we ask you first for your closing remarks.
Yeah, so we have an opportunity in this election to restore some balance to Oregon. We have an opportunity to give voice to a bunch of our fellow community members that don't feel represented. Right now, we're on the verge, if my opponent gets elected, of being in another supermajority situation. And what happens is you end up with a large group of people feeling like no one represents them. I mean, you see situations pop up where people start talking about wanting to be a part of another state. And that's a problem. That is societal divorce. And my wiring in every fiber of my DNA is to keep this place together. I grew up here. I love all of my friends and colleagues, whether they're Democrat, Independent, Republican. And what I don't want to see is people feeling like no one's speaking for them, because when that happens, then they say, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else. And things start getting scary because they get angry. And that is unacceptable to me. The Central Oregon way is taking care of each other and loving each other and supporting each other. And then later on finding out, oh, I didn't know you were a Democrat. I didn't know you were a Republican, because we kept the main thing. And because Oregon has been so out of balance, you end up with people that are getting back to those tribal areas because they just are going, nobody's speaking for me. So my job as your senator would be to represent a purple district, to hear from my colleagues and friends, Democrat, Independent, Republican, and represent them well, and try to distill down what their thoughts and their needs are, and finding another way that isn't just in the partisan foxholes, finding another way of being, I'm an innovator. So, okay, you say it has to be this way and it has to be this way. How about a third way? There might be something that gets us both a lot closer to the goalposts. That excites me. That fills me with hope. And that, I feel like, is the only way that we get out of this divisive partisanship and start pretending like we're going to still live together after November, because we can, but we have to choose it. So I'm Michael Summers, and I would really appreciate your vote.
Thank you. And Anthony, your closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. For too long, our region has been held back by walkouts, the extremist walkouts, which have held back our progress on public safety, on housing, on homelessness, on wildfire resilience, on climate resilience, on water resources. I love our home. It's worth fighting for. Rather than focusing on the negativity and what's wrong, let's focus on the future. I'm focused on making sure that this is a great place for my 3 daughters to grow up, go to college if they choose, start a business, and grow old in. That has to be our North Star. We're building an incredible coalition of Democrats, Republicans, non-affiliated voters, independents. So proud to be cross-endorsed by the Independent Party of Oregon and endorsed by former Republican State Representative Newt Buehler and every major labor union in our community. We can do this if we work together. And I'm confident that working together, we can meet our biggest challenges without walkouts, without extremism, without taking our ball and going home. So my name is Anthony Broadman. I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
And thank you to both the candidates, Anthony Broadman and Michael Summers, for participating in tonight's forum, and to the Highland School Girl Scout Troop 28163. They were participating in a national service project called Promote the Vote. So thank you, girls, for your support. This forum has been recorded and will be uploaded to the League of Women Voters website, or actually the YouTube channel, within 24 hours. So you can see it there, and please share it with your friends. Remember, your vote is your voice. Ballots will be mailed on October 16th. Make sure to get your ballot postmarked by Election Day on November 5th so that your voice can be heard. For more information about the candidates and all the candidates that are running for offices in Oregon, please check out vote411.org. I'm Mike Fisher on behalf of the League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of our democracy. Please drive, walk, segue, or skip safely home, and we'll see you at the ballot box. Thank you.
I want to know who's leaving on a Segway.
Yeah.
Follow you.